All right, welcome everybody. I'm Dr. Anderson, board certified in addiction, licensed psychotherapist, here to talk about wellness, orienting a new group of students, I guess you will. And what we're trying to accomplish by going through this process is how to live better, how to understand substance abuse, mental health issues, all kinds of stuff. So we cover a myriad of different information and different, levels of treatment, education, awareness, and wellness. All right. So if you got questions, just blurt them out. That's fine, and we'll go through it. But in general, I like to ask and go over basic information for kind of an idea of where everybody's at in terms of their knowledge. There's a lot of misinformation about substance abuse, mental health. So it's good to go over all different aspects to get a foundation of information. Okay, I want to talk briefly about some of the origins of where mental illness comes from, or substance abuse. Okay, substance abuse is a form of mental illness. Okay, can you have substance abuse without mental illness?
Sure.
Most people say yeah. The answer is no. And here's why. I know it's a weird thing because people compartmentalize them, but you can't really. When you alter your state of mind, is that going to affect the neurochemistry in your brain? Yeah. Is that going to lead, no matter what, to eventually anxiety, depression, thought processing issues? Isn't that the definition of mental illness? So yeah, so it's always co-occurring. Can you have mental illness without substance abuse?
Yes.
Yeah, you can. But is it most likely? Do people use drugs and alcohol to compensate for depression, anxiety, and chemical imbalance? Of course they do. So they run hand in hand, but you cannot have substance abuse without mental illness, but you can have mental illness without substance abuse. Okay. I want you guys to be able to delineate the two. Okay. Now, what causes all these things? First of all, what is the most common things that people struggle with? Okay. I hate to call it mental illness, even though it is, but I mean, that's such a kind of a derogatory term. But let's say dysfunction, okay? I prefer that better. So dysfunction, when people are struggling with things, how to deal with life. What are the most common things that we struggle with as human beings? Doesn't matter how old, what gender, race, anything. The one good thing human beings all share in common, of all races, of all kinds, that should bring us all together, is the struggles of life, right? And how to deal with life. That's universal in its application, and life doesn't discriminate. So name something that most people would struggle with that would cause them dysfunctional or discomfort. What's that? Finances, or finding, being productive. Because that's really what finances are, right? You're being productive with the goal is to be what? Independent, right? To be able to take care and self-care. What else? What did you say before? Relationships. Ooh, that's a big one. We're going to talk a lot about that today. That's why I'm prefacing this. Relationships. What about relationships? What's normal in a relationship? How to be in a relationship? How to deal with the breakup of a relationship, toxicity in a relationship. Ooh, you can go on and on and on. And what other things besides relationships? Are relationships only between lovers? No. What about parents? What about children? What about friends? Those are all relationships, correct? And they all have the same fundamentals in order for them to work. Okay, communication, trust, and intimacy. We'll go over that's a different section. But so that's an area of great concern. What else? What are the two main culprits that bring people discomfort in life? What's that? What's that? Well, physical health. We'll add that in there. Physical health, deterioration. Let's just call it aging. Unless there's catastrophic events like a car accident where you become paralyzed or lose a limb, or you're damaged through stroke or what have you. Okay, so medical issues. What about now? This is what, see, again, people overlook it, and I don't know if it's just been normalized or what. Depression and anxiety, are those fun things? Does everybody here like depression and anxiety? Of course not. So those are the most common manifestations of dysfunction. And do they bleed over into relationships? Do they deteriorate health? Okay, so we want to narrow down the culprits so that we can address the underlying, so that when you take care of the roots of a problem, what happens to the problem? It deteriorates. So if I can suppress or destroy the roots of the problem, then it doesn't matter all the symptoms of the problem because they'll all go away. Does that make sense? Too many times people deal with just the symptoms of dysfunction without getting to the underlying causes of it. Do you understand? So oftentimes people deal with problems superficially. And the problem with that is it doesn't fix anything. It only temporarily sedates it or puts it off because the underlying cause is still there. Does that make sense? So my emphasis in terms of helping folks is to let's get to the origins of the problem. Let's find out where these things stem from so we can uncover the root of the problem. And if we take care of the root of the problem, then what happens to the symptoms? They go away, and then it's no longer a problem. So there is a universal root of the problem, if you will, when it comes to dysfunction. Okay, all dysfunction, you could call this a unified theory of personality, I suppose, in terms of dysfunction. All dysfunction stems from the same seed. Okay, and here it is. It's too much of, or not enough of, or unhealthy versions of, meaning abuse. Love, attention, a sense of belonging, and safety and security. Now, of course, all those need to be explained because they're more complex than the simplistic vernacular. For example, safety and security. When I say safety and security, what do you think I'm referring to? In terms of rearing children, it's discipline, structure, and routine. It's having the consistency of that in order to impulse control, delayed gratification, put in boundaries, rules, delayed gratification, impulse control. All of that's crucial for the development of a child. If that area of life, let's say parents aren't, let's say there's only one parent and that other parent doesn't use discipline or structure or routine, then that child is going to grow up and not meet those developmental milestones. They're going to have impulse control issues and not be able to delay gratification. That's going to lead to impulsive behavior, distractions, inattentiveness or ADHD, and then that's going to cause problems in school, low self-esteem. Do you see where it'll manifest itself? And eventually, what does that turn into? Drug abuse, depression, anxiety, overcompensation for being insecure, bullying, all kinds of issues. But had we addressed the initial issue, none of that would have occurred, or very less likely to occur. Do you understand? So, sense of belonging. What do you think I mean by sense of belonging?
Just feeling accepted.
What's that?
Feeling accepted.
Yeah, feeling accepted. Now, why is that important for a child to feel accepted or to be part of something? Because that's the first taste of a sense of identity and self-worth. That's where they get their self-esteem. That's where they get stability from, mental stability, because they know that in that environment, they're part of something. They're accepted. That gives them identity, self-worth, a sense of self-esteem. If a child grows up and doesn't have that sense of belonging, they have low self-esteem. They don't have a sense of identity or purpose. And how does that make them feel? Very insecure and nervous and anxious and less valuable. And then that's going to bleed over, just like I said before, to poor peer interaction. They're going to withdraw internally, and they're going to have self-esteem issues. Do you see where that turns into a horrible mess later on? Okay. What about attention? Is there good attention and bad attention? Or no attention? Yeah, children need attention. People need attention. So it's important to get positive reinforcement and engagement by parents so they can get the appropriate attention. Attention doesn't mean being in the same room with the child. It means engaging in that child interacting with that child at their level so that they feel special, so that they feel valuable, and they're getting reinforcement for the behaviors for productivity, impulse control, delayed gratification, and exploration in the right way. Does that make sense? So a lack of attention can cause someone to feel insecure again. It could give them a sense of extroversion or introversion based upon too much or not enough. That's going to gear that child for overstimulation or understimulation, or even abuse. What if it's physical abuse? That's a form of attention. Or verbal abuse. That's a form of attention. So any kind of too much or not enough of our unhealthy versions of that type of attention, what's going to happen to that kid? They're not going to develop properly. Then they're going to have developmental laxes, and then they're going to try to compensate to that in an unhealthy way. And those children that grow up with that lack of attention or not attention or abuse in that area, or lack of a nuclear family, having fathers in the home, that's the single biggest predictor of dysfunction in children and young adults, is having a fatherless home, hands down. All because of the aforementioned reasons. They can't develop properly. They're not given that right attention or the discipline and the structure that both parents need to do, but both parents are necessary for that to occur adequately. Without that, there's going to have some developmental milestones that aren't going to get developed properly, and that's going to cause all kinds of horrible dysfunction. Anybody, I know it sounds kind of common sense. Anybody say, no, that can't be, or that sounds odd? We've all been through it, right? And didn't we have to go through compensations and inadequacies for the things that we didn't get? It's not about bad intention by parents, by the way. I never rarely see that. I see parents that are not equipped to be in relationships, didn't plan on having children, and now they're in a stressful situation. They're not in a stable relationship. They're not stable themselves. And how are they going to raise a child to be stable? Because children absorb what you are. And if you're dysfunctional and you don't have those stable in your life, how would you expect your child to have that? They are just a byproduct of you and how you are, plain and simple. Genetics, yeah, there's some weight to that in terms of influence, but it's minuscule compared to the learned aspect of it. Okay, so I don't really count that so much, unless there's abnormalities, physical abnormalities, which are rare. But your physiology is, you're mostly shaped by your parents and how they parent to you in your environment and what you learn. Okay, you see that cyclically when children grow up and they're dysfunctional. It's funny, if they have anger problems and the way they respond to discipline and stuff like that, you don't have to look very far to see that behavior in their parents. And you'll see little carbon copies of them. Now, they can hide theirs pretty good and the child doesn't, but I see when there's a dysfunctional child, I don't need to look very far to find a dysfunctional parent, because they're always there. I've never not seen that. Okay? Do parents like to hear that they're the cause of that, of their child's distress? And no. So are they going to be resistant to that? And you know who their best friends are? The pharmaceutical company. Parents, dysfunctional parents, love the pharmaceutical companies. Why? Because the pharmaceutical companies know, because they've been trained in psychological warfare against you, to put the emphasis that it's all genetic and that no bad parenting occurred here, that your child was born dysfunctional. And if you take this pill, it's going to make everything better. That is the biggest relief. Dysfunctional parents, they love that. They're like, see, I told you I wasn't a crappy parent. I told you I wasn't an inconsistent parent. He was born this way. Of course, that's completely and absolutely idiotic and not true in any sense of the matter. Are there some children that are, again, I don't speak to outliers or extraneous variables that are so minute in populace, of less than 1%. But I agree that it can be caused by that. I'm talking about the other 95% or 99%. Okay, so parenting is crucial. Environment is crucial. Okay, most of what you've learned in life, most of how you perceive things in life, most of your behaviors and your likes and dislikes in life are literally formulated and influenced primarily by your caretakers. Okay? Anybody disagree with that? If you think about it, it's pretty self-evident. Okay? Even down to relationships and what you find attractive versus not. There's called sexual archetypes, and these bonding and how you relate to others and how do you communicate and what you look for and stuff all has to do with the relationships of your primary caretakers with others. Okay, so the influence of parenting and environment in early childhood is just, it's crucial for your development. It's crucial for your success at life. So when I see folks coming in and they have depression and anxiety and they can't cope with life and they don't know what to do about it, what can I deduce from that logically, reasonably? Maybe they came from inconsistent parenting, divorce especially, single family homes, maybe even dysfunction, maybe even abuse. I don't so much see abuse anymore as I see overindulgence, entitlements. That's usually the cause. And you say, well, how can you love your child too much? Just the same as not loving them enough. Remember what I said. Too much of or not enough of has the same consequence. Okay? Overindulging a child or spoiling a child, they won't learn impulse control. They won't learn delayed gratification. They won't learn the value of something. They won't learn work ethic or hard work and sacrifice, because they've been overindulged. They won't learn any coping skills. Why? Because the parents have done everything for them, or parent has done everything for them. And they have an over-exaggerated sense of entitlement or self-esteem. Why? Because the parents tell them how incredible they are, how awesome they are, reward them all the time for doing nothing more than converting oxygen into carbon dioxide. And that becomes their full-time job later on in life. You know, they want to go to school, but they don't want to work, and their parents, they just live with them, and they're just, what's your job? Full-time daughter, full-time, son. Okay, that's not a job, though. And it may work for some people for a while, but in the end, what happens? Is that person going to find fulfillment in purpose, identity, self-esteem, a sense of happiness and self-worth? No, it's not possible unless you go through the developmental milestones that are required in life in order to attain those things. So if you, and this is how it relates, if you are missing in some of those areas, that doesn't mean you were necessarily abused or abandoned or your parents are horrible. It just means you're lacking in those areas. So it behooves you to what? Understand how the process works, where it could have gone wrong, so you can identify it. We've narrowed it down to 4 things, and we narrowed it down to the first 5-6 years of your life. That's pretty easy to follow, but right? And I guarantee you most dysfunction comes from those areas. Now, can it come later on in life? Let's say you were raised reasonably well and that you've met all those milestones. Can you still get dysfunction and addiction? Of course you can. Of course I'm not ruling that out. I'm saying the vast majority is from early childhood deficits or inconsistent parenting or trauma. But there's a good percentage that is achieved later on through catastrophic event or horrible loss or those types of things, okay? So you can develop those things later on in life too. They're just much easier to treat and easier to get back online because you've already got the fundamentals built in, and then you just have to make adjustments in life. But when you don't have the fundamentals built in, it's hard to get them later on in life. It's not impossible, it's just harder. If I went into your house and said, sir, I don't like the way you organize your house. I don't like the way you're eating. In fact, I don't like the way you do this. I wouldn't even got the first 2 out. What would he have done? I'd have been thrown out of the house. He would have called the police and trespassed me. Okay, people don't like to hear that. Now, I may have been right. And maybe if he would correct the things I asked him to, it would fix and help his life dramatically. Does he want to hear that? No, because that gives what we call cognitive dissonance. That gives a very uncomfortable feeling of vulnerability and being judged and all the insecurity and so on. If that guy's already got insecurity and so on, like I said before, then he's going to be hypersensitive to it, correct? So he's not going to take direction well. He's not going to listen to criticism. He's going to fight it, even though he knows he's wrong. Okay? So that's where you get the resistance for people that are addicted to drugs, because they found what they think works. They know it's wrong. They know it's harming them, but they think there's no alternative to it, and they don't want to be wrong about it, because then they have to literally go through the pain and suffering of change. And the brain hates that. You're wired in to not change. Literally, physiologically. Your brain loves homeostasis, even if it's at an equilibrium or an unequal distribution in the brain. So when your brain is off, but you've become accustomed to it or you've grown tolerant to it, it'll stick there. It'll stick there. Even if you know an alternative to it, the change of that alternative and then having to work to get it back, the brain is like, nah, I'll pass. I'll tough it out here. Okay? And that's why people stay in toxic relationships, in bad jobs, or bad friendships, or physical health that's debilitating. Because the brain does not like change. So you have to learn, I don't want to say to trick the brain, but to train the brain into accepting change is okay. Because those are the most successful people in life, are the ones that overcome adversity. Not because they like it, because they've learned to, because they've become good at it. So they've had to learn to accept change as part of life and as part of success. And the more they practiced it, the better they got at it, and the less painful it was, until the good started to outweigh the bad of change. And now it's automatic. Does that make sense? So they've practiced it enough for it to come into the parasympathetic nervous system as an autonomic response. Where some people run from it and escape from it and get high from it. Other people will face it, confront it, overcome it, and benefit from it. Do you see the difference? There's no difference other than your perspective and your competence level at dealing with stress and anxiety and obstacles. So do we want to learn about depression and anxiety? Do we want to learn where it comes from? Do we want to learn how to counter it and overcome it and to rise above it? Of course. Why wouldn't you? That's the whole purpose of psychology and behavioral medicine. All that is to what? To learn where things come from, how to identify that, and then to be able to work through it. That's the whole purpose of this class. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay, so pretty self-evident. All right, we'll go on to other stuff. I just wanted to do